Yeah, just a quick introduction. I'm Tabia from the Confucius Institute. We're still entering people into the Zoom room, so but we are at 4 o'clock, so I don't want to keep Sam waiting much longer. So we've normally really busy during Chinese New Year periods, going around Greater Manchester delivering workshops, and the cooking workshops are a big part of that. And since we can't do that, Sam kindly agreed to give talks. So this is the second one that she's holding for us. And we've also produced some cooking tutorials that you can find on our YouTube channel. As a follow-up, I will email you all with the recording of this session, so you can look back and maybe do some of the cooking if you feel inspired. And I will also include the links for the tutorials, so hopefully you'll find them quite useful. We're planning to run this for about an hour, and hopefully we'll have some time at the end to ask any questions that you might have. Do use the chat box to talk to me and also to Karen, who is the Deputy Director from the Confucius Institute and a native, so she's happy to answer any of the questions if she can. Otherwise, we'll read them out to Sam at the end. But that's enough from me. I'm going to stop sharing the slides and hand over to Sam. Hello and welcome.
Hi everybody, nice to see all the wonderful happy faces on this afternoon, and nice to see some people who are returning after attending our last one. So thank you, Tabia, for the introductions. I'm just about to share my screen, so bear with me 1 second. Just make sure I'm sharing the right thing and the share sound is on. Perfect. Okay. Right, so welcome to our online talk today for Chinese New Year. So the theme is Chinese New Year, and I'm going to be concentrating on how Chinese families celebrate the Chinese New Year together. So just a little bit about my background and my previous work with the Manchester Confucius Institute. So I've been working with Tabia and Karen and the team for probably a couple of academic years now to teach face-to-face cookery classes. My background is that my parents came to the UK from Hong Kong, so we're from southern China. I was born in the UK, but have grown up in and around the family food businesses. So I have learned the trade from working in the family restaurants and takeaways, but also from hanging about in the kitchens, as I've seen during the kind of family dinners and celebrations as everybody's gathered together. So yeah, I've kind of learned a lot of the traditions and family recipes that way, but I also do a lot of research and try out new recipes. So I'm actually going to be sharing a new recipe with you today, something that I have experimented with and tried out for the first time myself, especially for this talk. So my background is working with migrant communities within the voluntary sector, but about 5 or 6 years ago I had a bit of a career change and I decided to set up Koi as my own business to try and celebrate and share traditional Chinese and other East Asian recipes with the general British public. So this is part of the reason why I like to work with the Confucius Institute, in order to try and share our culture and ideas with people who are really interested in finding out more. So that is one of the reasons why I love to attend these talks and to share my ideas and recipes with you. So let's get started. So Chinese New Year in 2021, also known as the Lunar New Year, and also the Spring Festival, is actually starting from the 12th of February, which is in 2 days' time on Friday, but Chinese New Year's Eve is tomorrow. So it's quite timely, because if you wanted to take part, then you could actually be putting some of the things that I share with you in place ready for this year. So just to kind of go through what we're going to be talking about in the next 45 minutes or so, we'll have a look at some of the festive greetings and just the brief conversation that I had with Tabia and Karen just now before we let you into the Zoom room. It's very interesting because there are different traditions and different ways of greeting each other during Chinese New Year, depending on which area of China you're from. You may or may not be aware that the Lunar New Year is also celebrated by people across East and Southeast Asia in other countries. So they don't call it the Chinese New Year, they may call it Lunar New Year, or they have their own words such as Tet. So it's very much known as the Lunar New Year now. So the greetings that you might hear people say may be very different depending on which region they're from. So I'm going to go through 3 popular ones with you. And then I'm going to talk about the traditions and the rituals that you might find, what families would do together, the things that are symbolic for that time of year. Oh. Sorry, that's my doorbell going, let's ignore that. So the rituals and traditions, and then also I'm going to go through the egg dumpling recipe that I've filmed myself cooking, and I'm going to share that with you. And then we're going to have a question and answer session. So as Tabia mentioned before, if you want to put any questions into the chat box, if there's anything that only I can answer, or things that we don't have time to answer during the session, then I can answer those at the end. Okay, so the Lunar New Year starts, as I said, from the 12th of February 2021, and this year it's the year of the ox. And the you may already be aware that the Chinese calendar follows the moon, so the date of Chinese New Year will change slightly each year. The year of the ox refers to the Chinese zodiac, and if you do follow the Chinese astrology, then you might be interested in what this year has to offer according to the astrologists. And also you would also have an animal year based on the year that you were born, and it is said, if you do believe in astrology, that if it is your animal year, generally it's an unlucky year for you, but it's really up to you whether you decide that you're going to follow that or not. Chinese New Year generally is a time for family and friends to gather, to get together and spend time together. In China, you actually get it as public holiday. So the public holiday actually starts from the 11th of February and ends on the 17th of February. So you can understand that it's a huge part of the Chinese calendar. It's the main time of year when people have time off work. So people may work quite far away from home. So you'll get this mass migration of people back to their hometowns and home cities or villages from the big cities. And yeah, people just want to be with friends and family. So it's like Christmas, well, in China. Okay, so let's start off with some greetings. So happy Chinese New Year. As I said, my family are from Hong Kong, so we speak Cantonese. And I have both the Mandarin and the Cantonese way of saying it here. So for example, Chinese New Year, the Cantonese way of saying it would be San Lin Fai Lo. That's San Lin Fai Lo. Now, I've been trying to practice my Mandarin. I have to tell you that I'm not very good at it, but I'm trying to learn how to say the phrases in Mandarin too. So in order to say it to somebody from mainland China who speaks Mandarin, it would be 新年快乐, 新年快乐. So I'm sorry if I mispronounced that, but as you can tell, it's quite a very different way of pronouncing it. So this would be the most direct way of wishing somebody a Happy New Year, a direct translation. And then another way, which you may be familiar with, is Gong Hei Fat Toi. So Gong Hei Fat Toi actually is wishing somebody prosperity, but for Cantonese speakers, it's a very common way of greeting friends and family to say, to welcome the new year in. And it's something that's not actually widely used in the mainland of China, in other areas of China. So it was interesting for me to find out today that it's usually used within a business setting. So usually when you're wishing somebody prosperity in work. But as I said, it is quite commonly used within the Hong Kong and Southern Chinese communities. And then finally, another saying that you would find would be Dai Gat Dai Li. So that is a way of wishing somebody much luck and much profit or good fortune in the coming year. And the Mandarin way of saying that would be Da Ji Da Li. So yeah, again, if anybody wants to correct me at the end of this, feel free to do so, but I will continue to practice. So the sayings, there's lots of different sayings that we use during the Chinese New Year festival. And they're very traditional and symbolic and just very much part of the culture around the Lunar New Year. So it's almost kind of like you would say it to each person that you meet. Children would, for example, I don't know if you've heard about the red packets, so the festive red packets where young children and elders in the family would receive red envelopes, usually quite colourful and decorative ones with lucky words or pictures on them. They're called lacy. So you would, for example, say lacy Delloy, which means I've come for my lacy, so I've come for my money. So you would say Gong Hei Fa Toi, lacy Delloy. And it's quite a nice, cute thing for children to learn and to say when they're meeting their elders and other adults in the family. And, you know, people really love it to hear that from young children, and they would, you know, give them a small packet of coins or, you know, a note in an envelope just to wish them good luck and prosperity in the new year. Okay. So other rituals and customs that you may come across. So as I said, the Chinese New Year actually, we actually start preparing from New Year's Eve. So some of the things that we would do during New Year's Eve would be cleaning out the house and buying new clothes to wear from New Year's Day. So related to that would be the superstition that you shouldn't be sweeping your house on New Year's Day. So that's why we clean the house thoroughly on New Year's Eve. And you would also have people believe that you don't bathe or wash your hair on New Year's Day. So most people would make sure that they have a shower or have a bath and wash their hair on New Year's Eve. And that again relates to the idea that you don't want to be washing away any good luck that you have accumulated for the coming year ahead. So it's yeah, just one of these kind of traditions and cultural beliefs that have been passed on through the generations, and you know, people still stick to that. A lot of people would also buy something when they're buying new clothes, they would buy something red. I've heard, for example, when I was at university, I had a housemate who was from Taiwan, and she said that they would buy red underwear to wear from on New Year's Day. And that's not something that I've been brought up with, so that was really interesting to learn. So red clothes, red underwear, and then families would also prepare the house, for example, by putting up bright coloured decorations like lanterns. Red and gold are very lucky and symbolic. So you'll find if you were, for example, if you're from Manchester or if you're in a big city that has a Chinatown, that those areas will be completely decorated with red lanterns all the way around, and it's just a way to kind of signify that it's a special time of year, it's Chinese New Year, and we're decorating it, decorating the place and making it look festive. So people would actually do that at home too. So they might put a window sticker up, they might decorate with lanterns outside the house on the at the front door, as well as inside the house, which is very similar to the way that British people celebrate Christmas. And then on New Year's Eve, you also have the family reunion dinner, which is it's kind of something that pretty much all families would do. So it's actually more important than the meal that you would gather together for on New Year's Day. So families would get together, have a huge dinner. Depending on which area of China you're from, you would have something different, but there are common foods that are very symbolic that you would find on the reunion dinner table. So we'll talk about that a little later on. But it is something that most families would try and make sure that they get to. And then from New Year's Day, there's lots of celebrations. So there could be people attending parades in their towns or cities or villages. They could be watching traditional dances. There would most certainly be lots of firecrackers and fireworks displays. The giving and receiving of money in the red envelopes, and there'd be lots of other symbolic gifts as well. So there's lots of symbolism around the celebrations. For example, we quite often would gift things like pomelo, which is, it looks like a huge grapefruit if you've not had it before. But it belongs to the citrus family, but it's very traditional to exchange pomelo. And then one of the other traditions that my family have followed for many years, I don't know how widespread it is across China, but on New Year's Eve when you have your bath, when I was a child, I remember bathing in leaves and not really fully understanding why there was leaves in my bath. But they were actually pomelo leaves. They're quite difficult to get hold of. But pomelo leaves, it's believed that bathing in pomelo leaves is very a good way to kind of cleanse yourself in a symbolic way. So pomelo is very important within Chinese traditional celebrations. And then you've also got the clementines and oranges. So you'll find that families are gifting each other kind of baskets of fruit, and quite often you will definitely find tangerines. And the reason why tangerines are symbolic is because the phrase that I shared with you earlier, Dai Gut Dai Lei. So a tangerine or a clementine in Cantonese is called a gut, and gut sounds the same as one of the words in Dai Gut Dai Lei. So the idea is that you are kind of by gifting tangerines and clementines, you're kind of gifting this well wish to the person who's receiving it. And also, they're golden colour, and gold, as I said before, is a very symbolic colour within the Chinese New Year festivities. And then the other thing we need to ensure that we avoid, especially on New Year's Day, is avoiding gossiping and arguments, and making sure that we bring in the new year in a very positive way. So these are just some of the rituals and customs that we follow on New Year's Eve and New Year's Day. But the Chinese New Year is actually celebrated for much longer. And families and friends would, spend the time visiting each other and spending time together, catching up. As I said before, people could be living quite far away from their ancestral home or their hometown. And it would take a long time to travel there. It's very much a special occasion. So there are going to be lots of people that you haven't seen for quite a long time. Maybe you'll only go there once a year. So a lot of that time is spent catching up with people. The food around that time of year is really important, and the celebrations usually are kind of centered around sharing foods together. So on that note, we have some examples of what festive foods and snacks you would find. These are just examples. These pictures on the right are examples of things that I would typically have with my family. So in the top right, you have the tray of togetherness, which basically contains lots of different snacks that you would have, and you would basically have them for your guests. So just go through some of the things in there. There's chocolates and sweets. There's usually nuts, and you would quite often find candied fruits. So, for example, my mum would normally have lots of like candied coconut, candied kumquats. So they're like dried fruits that have been kind of coated in quite a lot of sugar. They've been preserved in sugar. So they're more traditional, whereas I would go with kind of lots of sweets and chocolates. And the idea behind that is that you will always have something to offer your guests when they come to visit. And it's really bad manners or bad form to let that tray sit empty. So you need to make sure that you keep that topped up as much as possible. And you would normally find either 6 or 8 different snacks in there. In kind of more modern days, there are other things that go in there. So you might find like cookies or candies, lollipops, that kind of stuff. But generally sweets, because you're wishing your guests a sweet life or a sweet future. Things like nuts and seeds, they're symbolic for kind of growth and new ideas and new things happening in your future life. So yeah, there's kind of lots of well-wishing behind these simple snacks that we have at the table. Other things that you might find, so I've just got a list of things here that kind of, and the symbolism behind it. So quite often you'll find spring rolls, which are very commonly found in the UK. They might be known as pancake rolls, actually. And I remember we have somebody who's joining from the US. You might know those pancake rolls. So again, they are made in big batches and offered to guests and eaten throughout the Chinese New Year. It's quite often you'll find that people have them in the freezer, so they're ready for when the guests come. And then you'll have tong yun, which is the second picture down. That is a glutinous rice ball, and they're usually filled with other sweets, and they're served in a sweetened syrup. So the one that I made was filled with a black sesame paste, and the syrup had fresh ginger to flavour it, and osmanthus flowers, so it had a nice floral flavour as well. Now the tong yun is really traditional. People usually have them at midnight and during the reunion dinner. So the idea behind that is that you're really kind of wishing that the family are coming together. So it's almost like, the rice balls are each family member, and you're bringing them together in a nice bowl of sweet soup. So yeah, that's something that's very commonly found. Noodles are eaten quite widely across China. They're sometimes referred to as longevity noodles, bringing happiness and longevity. So the longer the noodle, the longer your life is the idea behind that. And then something that you may not know is the go. So that's a Chinese New Year cake. It's not really a cake as we would know it in the UK or in Western food. It's actually again made from glutinous rice flour, and it's not aerated. It's quite dense, and we actually steam it, and then we can reheat it by pan frying it or steaming it again. So the New Year cake can actually be savoury or sweet. Okay, and then, as I said, we've got the tangerines and oranges, wishing people good fortune, candied sweets, and then, of course, dumplings. So I'm going to be sharing a different type of dumpling recipe with you today. But for the Confucius Institute, in the face-to-face classes, we have actually done the dumpling making class, the Tong Yun class as well. We've actually made the sweet rice balls with students through the face-to-face classes. There are other recipes, as Tabia mentioned earlier, on the YouTube channel for the Confucius Institute, so please check those out. So dumplings are usually eaten at the stroke of midnight on New Year's Eve, going into New Year's Day. And again, it's about people gathering and making dumplings together. Usually the family members will come and join in on the fun, make a huge batch of them and cook them up and eat them together. And the idea is that they look like the old style Chinese money, the gold ingots. They can be made in different ways and shaped in different forms. It's really popular now to make them look like cartoon characters and animals of different kinds. I've seen some beautiful ones that look like koi fish, but it's kind of, I think, beyond my artistic abilities to be able to make them look like fancy things. But I make a lot of dumplings, and we have quite a lot of them at home. So yeah, please do try and make some. They're quite an accessible and easy to follow recipe. So make them for Chinese New Year and share them with your friends and family. Okay. Right, so I'm going to share with you now the recipe for a different type of dumpling, and these are the egg dumplings, which I've been experimenting with for this talk today. So the egg dumpling, you probably saw it at the beginning of the presentation. The egg is actually the wrapper of the dumpling. So in the previous slide, you saw the wheat wrapper dumplings that were made from plain flour and water. But this is an alternative dumpling that is made for people, especially at this time of year. From research that I've done, I've found that apparently the recipe originated from Taiwan and has slowly migrated over to the mainland of China as a nice dish to share with people during the new year. And yeah, I've often seen these dumplings. It's not something that my family have shared together, but I think I'll definitely be making some more this new year. I did try a couple of times, well, I'd say 3 times actually, because the first time I did it, I don't think it was very successful, and I really wanted to try and really perfect it and make it much better so that I could share with you. So yeah, there's a couple of techniques I'm going to share, but this is the basic ingredients. There's not a huge amount involved. So usually the traditional ingredient as for the filling would be minced pork. You would just use eggs that you whisk to make the wrappers, and you kind of make like an omelette with them, a really thin omelette, and wrap the meat inside of that. But I'll show you a little video that I did to share that. And then to season the filling, we've got some soy sauce, sesame oil, some white pepper, some spring onions and ginger, and some coriander. Now I added the coriander in it's not very common to find that, but I really enjoy having coriander in my dumplings, and I know a lot of people really dislike it as a herb, so you don't have to add that in. And again, the spring onions and ginger are not essential, but it's really nice to have that colour and the extra flavour that you would get from the spring onions and ginger. So I would definitely recommend that you include that if you can. And then the implements that you would use to make the dumplings would be a round stainless steel soup ladle, some vegetable oil with a pastry brush, and some wooden chopsticks. So the reason why you've got the pastry brush is because you're going to use that to brush a light coating of oil on the ladle or the frying pan if you're going to use a frying pan. But if you don't have a pastry brush, that's fine. You can just make sure that you maybe get some, what's it called, a muslin cloth, like a small piece of muslin, or you could also use some kitchen towel, the stronger stuff that doesn't tear apart. And you can just soak that in oil, and you can coat your ladle or your frying pan with a soaked cloth or a kitchen towel too. Okay, so this is the method. So I have mixed, in this picture here, you'll see that I've mixed all of the filling ingredients together. So that's your pork, your flavorings, and any extra herbs and greens that you're going to use. And that's what it looks like. The water that I've added in, there was 2 tablespoons of water in the ingredients list. It's kind of important actually to add that in. So it seems like a bit of an odd thing to do, but by adding the water in and by then you would kind of whisk up the meat filling quite a lot. You would probably do it for about 2-3 minutes, and the water helps to make that meat mixture quite sticky. And it helps to bind that meat together so it doesn't become crumbly. So yeah, you won't actually get a watery filling. Some people also add some corn flour into the meat filling. It's not essential, and the reason that that's done is because if there is any extra liquid coming from the meat, you know, sometimes you cook meat and it releases lots of juices. So with that juice, water content of the meat, the corn flour will actually help to keep that quite thick so that it doesn't leak out of the dumpling when you're cooking it. But I didn't find that it was necessary to do that here. So I think that you could get away with not using corn flour. Okay, so yep, you would, the easiest way that I found to do this was to have the eggs that I whisked up in a jug. And I did find that it was a bit lumpy, so I did actually pass the eggs through a sieve to try and get any lumps out of it so it was nice and smooth. But again, you don't really have to do that. It's just a bit of aesthetics. And then, yeah, so you would, for when you're making a recipe, you would need about a tablespoon of egg mixture and a teaspoon of the filling. So depending on how much you use, you might find that you need to beat up and crack and whisk up more eggs as you go along. So do have some extra ones on hand just in case you end up with a lot more meat filling than the egg wrapper. Okay, so I'm not going to talk you through the method. You can kind of, I'm sure you've read that now, but I'm going to show you a video of how I've done it. So just bear with me 1 minute. So I have actually used my ladle. I'll explain why. So the reason I seasoned the ladle, as I explained earlier, I did try making this a few times. So I had a look online, had a look at how people make this, and I thought, oh, that looks quite fun to do. And I've got a couple of ladles. So I spent an afternoon trying to make these egg wrappers, and I could not get them to not stick to the ladle. So I decided to experiment a little bit by actually properly seasoning the ladle. So in effect, what I actually did was made myself a mini wok. So if anyone's ever bought themselves a carbon steel wok that doesn't have a non-stick coating, and you know that you need to season that wok so that nothing sticks to it, that's basically what I did with this ladle. And it was actually quite interesting to do. I did it a couple of times because I found that once I cleaned it, the seasoning came off it, but it just made it so much easier. So this is something that's quite fun to do if you've got a few hours, because you do need to experiment a little bit with it. But if you don't have a few hours, then I would suggest that you use a frying pan, because it is very easy to do in the frying pan as well. Unfortunately, as I'm going to share with this video with you, it's very short, so I'm just going to quickly show it to you. So as you can see there, my mini frying pan isn't particularly good at keeping things level. No, I don't know whether it's my frying pan or my cooker, but everything was kind of moving to one side and kind of not staying in a circle. So I would say that it doesn't really matter that you don't get a perfect circle like you would do if you used a ladle. What matters is that you can seal the edges. So what's really important when you're making these egg dumplings is that when you put the mixture, the filling into the middle, that the egg isn't fully cooked, because it wouldn't stick if it was fully cooked. So the best thing to do is, whilst the egg is still running in the middle, to put the filling in, because any kind of egg mixture that's uncooked will kind of move to the edges, and that would help you to seal the edge. And then that's where I use the chopsticks. It's quite important to use non-metal chopsticks and non-plastic ones, because the metal ones will conduct heat and start to burn. You'd burn your hands, and then the plastic ones are likely to melt because you're using it on quite a high heat. So wooden ones are best. And yeah, you can just kind of experiment a little bit with the level of heat. So I found that if I put it on I have a gas hob, so I put it on the smallest ring of the hob and had that on a kind of a medium, and that seemed to work perfectly. But yeah, using a frying pan is a lot easier, but you don't get that kind of really perfect looking dumpling if that's what you're after. So one thing to make sure that you know about is that these dumplings are not fully cooked at all. So you can't eat them straight from frying them like this. It's really important that you actually continue to cook them in another way. So I'm just going to share with you one other recipe. Okay, let's see if I can move on to the next slide. Sorry, bear with me 1 minute. Right, okay, next slide. So another small video here. So the recipe that you find here that you can see is a really simple one, making a gravy out of oyster sauce. So oyster sauce might be something that you already have in the cupboard or in the fridge in your Chinese ingredients. Really easily found in UK supermarkets up and down the country as well. Or head to your Asian supermarket if you have one nearby. So it's just basically making a gravy and then popping the half-cooked egg dumplings into that gravy and finishing off in the gravy. So I call it like stewed or braised in the oyster sauce. So the ingredients here are basically just a bit of oil, some minced garlic, oyster sauce, soy sauce, sesame oil and white pepper, and hot water, and then a bit of corn flour if you want quite a thick gravy. So I'm just going to quickly play this short video. So as you can see, I have just served the dumplings in a bowl with a bit of the gravy on top, and I've just put some freshly chopped spring onions on top of that. So that's really nice to share with maybe some noodles on the side, or you can have a big plate of it in the middle and everybody can share it as part of a sharing family style meal. And then let's move on to the next slide. Okay, and then other serving suggestions. So you could also just steam the egg dumplings for probably about 15 minutes just on their own, and you can have them plain without any kind of sauce. Maybe you'd have some dipping sauces on the side to go with it, maybe like a crispy chili oil. But I also had the dumplings with some noodles. So I got some stock and boiled the noodles and added some vermicelli. So added the vermicelli noodles and then popped the dumplings into the noodle broth and added some mushrooms and some Napa cabbage and made that into like a one bowl meal, which was really nice to have at lunchtime. And it's quite a nice light way to enjoy the dumplings. So as you can see, there's kind of different ways that you can serve them. Another way, if you're so inclined to have a hot pot. Now, if you attended the last talk we had for Christmas, you would have heard me talk about the hot pot, which is basically a big pot of soup in the middle of the table. Now you can have maybe a couple of pots, or you might have a pot that's divided that's got different flavors of stock in. Sometimes you've got one side that's spicy and one side that's quite mild. And then there's lots of raw ingredients on the table, such as meat and noodles and vegetables, maybe other kinds of dumplings, wontons, fish, anything like that, prawns. So egg dumplings would make a really great addition to your hot pot to have it on the side, and you can just pop them into the stock and enjoy it as part of your hot pot meal. Okay, so that is the end of my talk. I can see that there's been a few points of discussion in the chat, so I'm just going to stop sharing my screen and then we can bring Tabia back in. How do I stop screen share? There we go. Right. Welcome back, everyone.
Hello. Yeah, we've had a couple of questions about vegetarian replacements and alternatives. Karen answered already quite extensively, suggesting that you could perhaps use like a meat alternative like veggie meat, or like chestnuts or fried tofu.
Yeah.
Maybe you could explain that in a bit more detail.
Yeah, sure. So yeah, I mean, it is quite common for people, for example, on Chinese New Year's Day to actually eat vegetarian food only, especially families who come from a Buddhist religion background. So it's actually quite a good question, because, you know, it'd be quite nice to have these on Chinese New Year's Day and keep it vegetarian. So I would say tofu would be a really good alternative. You would probably go for a medium to soft tofu rather than the firm type, because you would want it to be quite, I want to say the word mushy, but that doesn't sound very appealing. So it needs to be quite tacky so that it binds easily, because what you don't want is, so for example, if you use something like quorn, like a quorn mince, which is quite crumbly, it probably wouldn't hold very well in the middle of the dumpling when you're trying to form it, unless you made bigger ones. If you made larger sized dumplings, then that would work. And there's nothing to say that it has to be a really small one. So yeah, using tofu would be really good. I have seen versions online where there's no kind of protein, it's just vegetables, but I would make sure that you pre-cook the vegetables, so almost like stir fry them. So there's one recipe that I came across which uses Daikon Radish, or you might know it as turnip, and that's quite often used in Chinese New Year recipes. So I don't know if you've ever heard of a turnip cake, and that's something that is cooked and shared amongst family and friends. So it's actually the Daikon radish, the white radish, that's grated, and you add kind of various meats and dried seafoods to it. Maybe some like dried shiitake mushrooms as well. And you kind of steam it into a block. So that's why we call it a cake, because it's like in a block. And you slice that up and pan fry it or have it steamed. So you would have, those kind of ingredients around anyway during this time of year. So it'd be quite nice to have that as quite a seasonal filling for vegetarians. So maybe get some shiitake mushrooms and rehydrate them. And then I would grate the radish and steam them or stir fry them so that you get a lot of the extra water out of them. And then mix the mushrooms and radish together with the same flavorings that I suggested before. Maybe add some corn flour to it, because it might form a bit of extra liquid that you don't want to kind of seep out. And then just use that as a filling. But yeah, chestnuts are just a really good idea, because I really like sweet chestnuts in food, and it's quite commonly found in Chinese recipes. So yeah, you could have some as a bit of extra texture and sweetness as well. That'd be really nice.
Yeah, Carol was saying to that, you could probably shred some king oyster mushrooms, which are often used as the pulled pork substitute.
Yeah, that's true. And there's also, I don't think it's in the UK yet, but Omni Pork is a vegetarian alternative to pork, which is massive in China at the moment. I think they launched in the East much sooner than they did here, because in China it's the kind of main meat that's eaten, and it seems to be really well liked as a comparison for other pork products. So yeah, I'm quite excited to try it.
That has actually been mentioned in the chat box as well.
Oh, perfect. Is it available yet? I'd like to get my hands on some.
Nicola is saying that Omnipork is now available in some Longdan stores in London. So perhaps if you've got
that's
any.
Interesting. Longdan have they have an online delivery service as well. So I'm going to have a look at that.
Then we've got another question. Would you be able to use Chinese fake chicken as a substitute?
Is that the stuff that's quite dry that you find in the freezer sections? Yeah. So I think you could, but it would be quite, So it would be quite bitty and crumbly. So you would need to try and find a way to either bind it together with something. So not just use the fake chicken, but maybe mix it with some other vegetable which is quite tacky, or just be okay with the fact that it might be a bit more fiddly to play around with. But yeah, I mean, there's lots of vegetarian and vegan mince products out there now, which kind of have that same quality around having mince meat. So yeah, just experiment with it. I think because you're adding lots of flavor to it, I mean, feel free to add extra soy sauce or whatever it is that you want to add in. You can flavor it any way that you want.
Alana's asked a bit more questions about the origin of the dumplings to the mainland. So when did they come to the mainland, and have they been enjoyed in Taiwan for a long time before that? So I don't know if you can answer that.
Yeah, so I don't actually have the answer to that. So it's only really in passing that I read that they originated from Taiwan, because anytime I try a new recipe, I always try and find out where they originated from, and is it originally from China? Because there's such a lot of movement of people in that area of the world, and cultures have exchanged recipes and foods. So one in some of the research that I found, they were saying that it originates from Eastern China, and I guess because it kind of is on the border towards the Taiwan side, that maybe that's kind of where it came from. But I couldn't really tell you actually when that happened. I think it's just more popular in Taiwan and more well known as a Taiwanese style dumpling than the wheat wrappers.
And she also asked, are there many vegetarians in China? I think she's quite interested.
Yeah, there are a lot of vegetarians in China, mainly because of the Buddhist religion. So Buddhism really encourages vegetarian eating, and you will find that even although most Buddhists aren't vegetarian, a lot of people who are devout will follow a vegetarian diet at special times of the year. So during specific events and festivals, such as on Chinese New Year's Day, people will stick to a vegetarian meal for that day, or vegetarian meals. And you will also find that the food that you have at the temples would be vegetarian offerings. So that's why tofu and soya products are quite widely found in China, because of that history of having a vegetarian diet.
Oh, thank you. So you've been talking about quite a lot of vegetarian fillings for the egg dumplings. Would they work with the more or better known wheat dumplings as well?
Yeah, definitely.
Or would you have to think about different fillings altogether there?
No, for the wheat dumplings, you can put anything in a wheat dumpling. It's you know, it's kind of a very plain vehicle for transporting fillings into your mouth. it's like having a sandwich where there's like the bread and then you have the nice filling in the middle. So a dumpling is very much the Eastern version of that, where you can have any kind of filling. I've seen sweet fillings in a dumpling as well. You know, I've seen people put bananas and Nutella into it, or apples. You know, you can put anything into a wheat dumpling. And the wheat wrapper, because it's quite stretchy, it's much more forgiving. With the egg wrapper, it's just not got that kind of gluten in it to help to stretch. So that's why you kind of need some filling that's quite soft, that's not going to kind of poke through on the egg wrapper. And also, yeah, it's quite delicate. So when you're cooking it after you've pan fried it, there is kind of only certain ways that you can actually prepare that. Whereas a wheat dumpling, you could boil that in a big pan of water and it'll still stay intact. So yeah, they're much more forgiving.
I think we've covered all the questions.
Perfect.
I can't see any more in the chat. Yeah, I will, like I said before, we'll follow up with an email and I will share all the tutorials that Sam has produced for us since last March. And I will also share a link for a survey. So if you've got any suggestions for some future events, or perhaps some tutorials, if you want to learn how to cook something, we always want to hear new ideas and be inspired, and then I'll hand them over to Sam. Yes, there are just lots of comments saying thank you, very informative. So I will pass all those on. That's fantastic to hear. I think that's all from me. Sam, would you like to add anything at the end?
No, I mean, I just want to wish everybody a happy Chinese New Year, and I hope that if you are going to be joining in the festivities, that you do enjoy them and you've learned something today in today's talk that you can bring into your celebrations with your family and friends. So gong hei fat tori. And yeah, wishing you a very happy and prosperous new year for the year of the ox. And yeah, we look forward to seeing you at future events, and I look forward to hearing your feedback from the form that Tabia sends out as well. So thank you, everybody. Thanks for your time and coming to join us.
Yes, that just leaves me to thank you all as well. Thank you for joining us, and thank you to Sam for delivering such an interesting talk. And happy Chinese New Year from the Confucius Institute in Manchester.